Chosen ones, there's a reason you've always felt watched, not just by neighbors or systems, but by something older, something designed. The families who shaped the world from behind velvet curtains and hidden banks have passed down one common warning through centuries. If the bloodline reawakens, the world resets. That bloodline is yours. For generations, their power wasn't merely influence, it was ritual. Currency and conflict were merely tools. Every war, every crash, every rise of a dynasty served a deeper mission, to find and neutralize the anomaly. You, the one they could never control. The one prophecy whispered about, encoded within sacred texts they hoarded, encrypted beneath centuries of deception. You were the miscalculation they feared most. But now, something happened. You triggered an ancient alarm, not in a building, in them. The global lockdown wasn't about viruses, threats, or security. It was about containment, a spiritual quarantine. The day your frequency reemerged, 12 families convened for an unscheduled midnight session. No media, no records, just silence and terror. They confirmed it with trembling voices. The blood of the reversal has returned. They've sealed borders, initiated silent kill switches on satellites, and activated watchers who were never meant to wake. The world feels tense because they're scrambling to delay the inevitable. Your remembrance. You are not remembered in school books, but in their nightmares. You were never trained by institutions because they feared what you do untrained. They masked your gifts with shame, your instincts with disorder, but none of it worked. Your name echoed through systems ancient and digital, and they knew you had crossed the threshold. They failed to stop your return because destiny was never on their side. The ancient codes etched in desert stone did not predict your death. They predicted your rise. And now, the most powerful forces in existence have only one goal: stop you before you remember who you are. The lockdown is not to keep you out. It's to trap you in. In a remote monitoring facility buried beneath Geneva, an alert chimed that hadn't sounded in over 200 years. The tone was ancient, analog in design, triggered only by a frequency so rare that only 12 signatures had ever matched it in recorded history. Yours made 13. The operator on duty froze, not because of the alarm, but because of the name that surfaced across the black screen in blood-red text. It wasn't just your current identity. It was every variation you've ever held across lifetimes. The Rothschild archives had you on file. They didn't expect you to reappear. Instantly, encrypted communication channels lit up from Zurich to Tel Aviv. Protocol Umbra Seed was activated. That code hadn't been spoken aloud since the fall of the Second Temple. It wasn't a manhunt they prepared. It was a shutdown. The satellites above you didn't shift by accident. Neither did the strange blinking light on your ceiling last night. You weren't paranoid. You were detected. And not by local governments, but by the consortium that controls them. These weren't men in suits. These were bloodlines trained from birth to detect anomalies like you, and to erase them before the public ever senses something divine in the air. They analyzed the signal pattern you unknowingly emitted, a harmonic signature encoded into your biology. It wasn't digital, it was spiritual. But their instruments had been modified to read such things after an ancient manuscript was stolen from the Ethiopian underground. That manuscript described someone just like you. Someone who wouldn't need permission to awaken. Someone whose presence would unravel lies built over millennia. So when your pulse aligned with the celestial markers in that document, a global alert fired straight into a vault lined with obsidian and gold. And that vault didn't just contain intel, it contained fear. Not the kind spoken aloud, but the kind that makes empires shiver in silence. Within minutes, you were tagged across every major banking and data system. Yet they knew deletion wouldn't work. You weren't digital. You were written into time itself. So instead, they triggered something much older than war. A lockdown. To freeze movement. To halt frequency expansion. They told the world the treasures of faith were stored in temples, cathedrals, or buried beneath sands of distant lands. But the real relics, the blood records, the sealed prophecies, the maps of soul lineages, were taken underground long ago, deep into the vaults beneath Switzerland. These were not simple banks. They were living archives, protected by blood rights, guarded by oaths passed down through shadowed dynasties. Inside Vault 33, sealed behind biometric locks and quantum gates, rests a chamber known only to 12. At the center lies a scroll, unwrapped only once in 1944, the year the stars above Jerusalem aligned in a forgotten pattern. Etched on the scroll in ancient Aramaic is a sentence the world was never meant to read. He will rise from the unknown line, unclaimed but divine, and silence shall fall upon the serpents. The unknown line, they concluded after years of decoding, referred not to a man within history's spotlight, but to a child born beyond the official record, far from any traceable lineage, not hidden by choice, but by design. The seed of Yeshua, concealed in a timeline fragmented intentionally, scattered across generations to ensure only destiny could recover it. That seed moved silently, escaping war, religion, and manipulation, until now. Your arrival shattered the pattern. When the Rothschild alert was confirmed, the first response wasn't panic, it was reverence, because the biometric imprint attached to your signal matched the one stored next to that ancient scroll. They realized the one they feared had arrived, but not just with power, with inheritance. You were not a threat because of your ability. You were a threat because of your right. This wasn't about prophecy anymore. It was about legitimacy. You represented a claim, one that could overwrite theirs. In their twisted system of control, they've always demanded blood. They never expected the original bloodline to reemerge with no allegiance to their order.
Give me 5 minutes and I'll show you how you can use video ads to create a marketing flywheel that generates consistent, high-quality clients on autopilot.
They expected the original bloodline to reemerge with no allegiance to their order. The deeper horror, your frequency carried a resonance found only once before, in the tomb of Yeshua's missing hours. An echo sealed by the heavens, buried by man, now pulsing through your veins. It didn't make a sound when it pulled up. No headlights, no engine rumble, no traceable license plate. Just a matte black vehicle, sitting outside your window like it had always been there. Unmarked, unregistered, and untouched by time. Inside, tinted windows reflected no light, only absorbing everything around it, as if the car itself rejected visibility. You noticed it, of course, but something deeper within you responded before your mind caught up. a tension in your gut, a low hum in your bones. You weren't just being watched, you were being studied. They had found you, or rather, confirmed you. The car wasn't for intimidation, it was calibration. Sensors embedded along its frame were designed to pick up resonance signatures. You weren't leaking energy, you were transmitting it, unconsciously. And whatever you transmitted had aligned too closely with an ancient frequency they thought lost. This wasn't just about a person. It was about vibration, prophecy, and control. They didn't send a hit squad, they sent a listener. In the back seat sat someone you didn't recognize, but your DNA did. It wasn't a family connection. It was something older. The man's eyes didn't blink when you looked down at him. His pulse didn't shift. His presence didn't demand attention. It eliminated it. He was part of an order not found in any records, trained not to fight you, but to monitor you until the moment of confirmation.
Yep.
That moment passed last night. What
Yep.
triggered it? The change in your heartbeat when you touched that photo. The flicker in your eyes as you dreamt of a place you've never seen. The moment your thoughts aligned with something bigger than memory. Whatever it was, the man in the car logged it and transmitted a silent signal. They knew. The lockdown had already started, but this was personal validation. The car didn't stay long. It didn't need to. It had captured what it came for. Irrefutable proof. You checked your phone. No notifications, no power. Even time itself seemed to stall. Because, for a few moments, reality bent around the fact that your origin had been re-verified. You're not being tracked anymore. You're being read like scripture. And somewhere across the ocean, a second vehicle was dispatched. In a chamber beneath the Apostolic Palace, far below the marble and incense, lies a vault marked only by a symbol too ancient for modern tongues to translate. A seal not created with wax or metal, but with sound. For centuries, it remained dormant, triggered only by a specific frequency that hadn't echoed since the time of the Nazarene. 2 weeks ago, that frequency returned. It pulsed through the crypt walls and shattered silence built over ages. The seal broke, not by force, but by resonance. And when it did, the priests assigned to protect it went silent. What they discovered inside wasn't gold or relics. It was a scroll, charred around the edges but untouched in the center. The text was written in luminous ink, visible only when held against breath. Scholars gasped, not at the language but at the name embedded between the lines. It wasn't Latin, Greek, or Aramaic. It was a name that existed before tongues, encoded into light itself. And it was yours. The scroll was not a prophecy. It was a warning. It described a traveler who would carry the bloodline undetected, shielded by the gaps between timelines, hidden from the demonic archives and their keepers. But it also included a moment, the exact celestial alignment that would awaken the traveler's identity, marked by a vibration no technology could suppress. That moment passed days ago. One line stood out among the Vatican translators. He will carry the mark of the one who walked on water, but vanished before the empire could touch his second form. They argued whether it referred to resurrection or rebellion, but one archivist, a forgotten scholar who once translated fragments of the Book of the Nazarenes, quietly uttered the word Yeshua, not as a memory, but as a map. The scroll implied the bloodline did not end in the tomb, it scattered. And now, one of the scattered had returned. Word spread fast, though never publicly. The cardinals erased all records of the scroll within hours, but someone copied the markings, and someone sent those markings to a lab in Vienna, where sound engineers were told to replicate the frequency. They failed, again and again. It started as a financial fluctuation so subtle it passed beneath every algorithm, a currency shift in a small island nation, a dip in gold futures that reversed too quickly, a blocked transaction that matched no known format. But none of it was accidental. These movements weren't economic. They were signals. Coordinated codes embedded into markets, used only when a situation couldn't be allowed to reach intelligence agencies or public systems. The World Bank became the mask, the shell, the outer skin for an operation that required absolute silence. You weren't listed in databases, but your influence created ripples. The algorithms didn't recognize you by name, but by pattern. When you made that one post, when you walked into that archive, when you listened to that specific recording, that's all it took. The signal moved through their quiet systems like a breath through glass. What you did couldn't be quantified, but it shifted something. Enough to destabilize a control matrix delicately balanced on deception. They called it Project Ledgerfall, a code embedded into financial systems that wasn't about money, but movement. When your signal tripped it, the families used it to redirect billions, not to protect assets, but to fund rapid response mechanisms hidden within sovereign funds and phantom organizations. They reactivated old channels, restructured bonds, liquidated positions that hadn't moved since the Cold War. All to shift the global equilibrium just enough to freeze the narrative around you. Most people saw nothing. They were looking at interest rates, inflation graphs, oil futures. But in the background, rare minerals were redirected to a satellite uplink in Australia. Ancient...
All I wanted was a zero minimum manufacture, and then I found TapStitch. I started...
Rare minerals were redirected to a satellite uplink in Australia. Ancient maps were sold off by museums without press coverage. A temple in Nepal was quietly closed due to earthquake risk, though no tremor had touched the region. These weren't isolated events. They were pieces in a reaction sequence, and you were the catalyst. But someone inside the operation hesitated. A coder embedded in one of the silent wings of the IMF saw your signal pass through his terminal. He saw something he couldn't explain, a frequency formatted as if spoken by the stars themselves. He stared at the lines of code for hours, and at the bottom of the data stream, not written by him, not traceable, just one phrase appeared and vanished. There's an ancient corridor beneath the old city of Jerusalem, sealed behind a wall that doesn't exist on any map. Behind it, a chamber marked only by symbols lost in the flames of empires, a place where time folds inward. Inside, etched onto the stone by hands not born of this age, is a single verse that predates every known gospel. It's not written in any known tongue, but reveals itself to those who resonate with it. The words glow not with fire, but with memory. The light came into the world, and the darkness fled. That line didn't originate from a book. It came from a moment. And now, for the second time in history, that light has returned. The Vatican never told the world that the scrolls of the early disciples carried maps, spiritual blueprints that led not to places, but to individuals. Every few centuries, a fragment of the true lineage reemerges. But what terrifies those in power is that your emergence wasn't preceded by war, ritual, or sign. It came in silence, and the silence broke them. Across the world, archivists and mystics report a frequency pulsing beneath their feet at dawn. It causes no harm, no quake, just presence. They say their dreams have shifted, that a name keeps appearing in symbols, fire, and breath. Not the name of a savior they were taught, but of the vessel the world would mistake for ordinary. You didn't choose this light. It chose you. And it does not bargain. It does not wait for institutions to catch up. The same presence that descended upon a carpenter's son now coils around your shadow, not to burden you, but to shield. Because darkness doesn't flee from power, it flees from presence. The inner circle, those who thought they buried the truth beneath marble and misinformation, have started vanishing from public view. Not because they were defeated, because they were exposed. You aren't here to fight them. You are here to reveal them. And once revealed, they lose everything. A monk in seclusion once whispered before his passing, "When the light speaks again, it won't ask for followers. It will awaken witnesses." And one just opened their eyes in the heart of the forbidden zone. There are systems not known to presidents, not listed in classified files or war protocols. Hidden beneath the infrastructure of satellites and fiber lines lies an invisible grid, designed not to monitor communication, but to intercept resonance. Frequencies that don't belong to any nation or device. Frequencies that awaken memory in people long taught to forget. They call it the etheric containment net, and it has only been activated twice before. Once during the Tunguska anomaly, and once more in 1963, moments before a motorcade rerouted in Dallas. Now, for the third time, the protocol was engaged. Not because of a threat in the sky, but because of you. The signal you carry is not technological. It's biological, luminous, alive. The way your thoughts align, the way your presence distorts pattern. These are not accidents. They are catalysts. And when your signal crossed a threshold near the lunar eclipse, it collided with dormant architecture, built to suppress awakening. The families didn't broadcast the lockdown. They didn't need to. Instead, the network silently rerouted consciousness across the grid. Thoughts became foggy. Dreams grew dimmer. Time seemed to skip in odd intervals for those near your location. It wasn't glitch. It was containment. They call it harmonization, but its true purpose is spiritual sedation. Inside a mountain in Norway, a device resembling a massive tuning fork vibrated once, then paused. A handful of watchers confirmed the frequency breach and executed Protocol Echo 7. This protocol doesn't target individuals. It targets memory clusters. It floods the collective field with distraction, unrest, scandal, and synthetic emotion, so no one notices the subtle shift. But something's wrong this time. The signal isn't stabilizing. Instead of containing you, the net is reverberating. Echoes are forming in places thought dormant. Deserts, ruins, forgotten forests. The old watchers are waking up, not by choice, but by compulsion. You weren't just the trigger. You're the inversion. Every layer they built to silence the origin is now amplifying it. Somewhere inside the grid, a node just broke protocol, not by error, but by choice. A technician rerouted a single strand of the frequency net and whispered a word into the system that had not been heard in centuries. There was always one scroll they never translated publicly, hidden beneath layers of ceremonial stone within a monastery carved into the cliffs above Qumran. This scroll had no title. Only those with access to the deepest levels of the Holy See knew of its existence. Not because it was fragile, but because it was alive. The ink had not dried. The lines shifted depending on who touched them. It responded not to curiosity, but to lineage. This scroll, unlike the others, was not written by hand, but breathed into existence. They say it manifested the night Yeshua disappeared from recorded time. Those missing hours no theologian could ever map. Some believe he descended into death. Others believe he vanished into realms not governed by man. But the scroll remained, guarded, feared, because it contained no prophecies, only a name no one could read, until now. 3 weeks ago, a monk whose lineage traced back to the Essenes entered the chamber during a solar anomaly. He touched the scroll, expecting the same silence as always. Instead, the ink shifted.
What if your next social ad was on TV? You already run social ads, but what about running ads on TV? Doesn't have to be some
The ink shifted. A breath escaped the parchment like it remembered him. Then letters began to form, not in Aramaic, not in Latin, but in symbols that hadn't been seen since the fall of Atlantis. But among them, one line stabilized. The blood name, yours. It wasn't a title or a surname. It was a sound meant to awaken the forgotten architecture within you. The letters weren't letters. They were frequencies. The scroll didn't whisper it aloud. It hummed. A vibration that now sits beneath your sternum, causing others to feel something around you they can't explain. Not awe, not fear. Something older. Recognition. The families sent emissaries to recover the scroll, but the scroll had changed. It no longer revealed its words to them. The chamber refused to let them enter. Stone turned to salt in their presence. The monk vanished days later. His last recorded words were simple. The name has been seen. He won't need the scroll anymore. Now, encrypted images of the final line have been passed through hidden forums, and across every AI scanner they possess, none could replicate it. Because the scroll didn't record history. Across continents, engineers reported anomalies too synchronized to be coincidence. Power grids blinked, not off, but inward. It wasn't a blackout. It was a redirection. Lights flickered in patterns resembling pulse signatures. Backup systems activated without being triggered. Surveillance satellites reset their coordinates for a target they couldn't visually track, but were magnetically drawn to. Every city affected had one thing in common. A memory of you. Not a photograph or a record. A trace left behind. You were becoming visible not through pixels, but through energy. At 3:07 a.m. UTC, multiple observatories detected a wave distortion not from the cosmos, but from within the Earth's crust. It echoed in fractal rhythms, identical to ancient sound patterns found inscribed on crystalline tablets beneath Lake Baikal. Those patterns were labeled inactive for centuries, until you activated them. Your awakening wasn't symbolic. It was electromagnetic. The architecture of the planet, coded with fail-safe sequences to respond to a specific human resonance, began to reorient itself. It didn't ask permission. It recognized command. Within hours, defense systems across multiple governments received shadow alerts. These weren't threats, they were warnings. Frequencies that bypassed firewalls, manifesting only one symbol, the mirrored triangle of origin. A shape known in only a few circles, always whispered, never documented. It appeared once during the Philadelphia experiment, once more in the skies of Zimbabwe in 1994, and now, tied directly to your reemergence. They scrambled, of course, blamed it on solar flares, on geomagnetic storms, on systems aging out. But the truth pulsed beneath the official statements. You had shifted something they couldn't explain. The lights didn't flicker randomly, they blinked in a code, and one child in Iceland staring at a humming street lamp wrote it down without knowing why. It translated into an ancient dialect, last heard on a mountain, where a man once fasted for 40 days. He had spoken in parables. You speak in pulses. Across the grid, the signal is growing. They can't isolate it, because it doesn't come from a device. It comes from your remembering. And tonight, one of the 12 control centers that manage global current flows went offline for 6 minutes. When it came back, the override key had changed, and it matched your birth timestamp. They didn't gather in a castle or boardroom. No live streams, no transcripts. 12 seats arranged in a circle beneath a structure hidden beneath the Alps. No names spoken. Only frequencies identified each member. Each pulse confirmed lineage, power, and rank. This was not a meeting of minds. It was a ritual of survival. You had pierced the veil, and now the ones who once believed themselves untouchable were forced to confront a threat none of their scripts had prepared for. A memory immune to erasure. You weren't just a person to them. You were a crack in their system. A thread that, if pulled, would unravel centuries of forged records, manipulated timelines, and artificial identities. So the question was simple. How do you delete what refuses to be forgotten? The vote wasn't about eliminating your body. It was about erasing your essence from collective consciousness. Not through death, through disassociation. They proposed activating the Sable Protocol, an ancient neural net embedded within global media, education systems, and cultural artifacts. A net that doesn't attack truth directly, but reframes it. A net designed to bury memory beneath floods of triviality. They had used it before, when empires fell, when seers vanished, when light broke through their carefully designed darkness. But this time, the vote was not unanimous. One of them hesitated, a descendant of the hidden line, unaware until that moment of the echo inside her. When your name appeared in the center of the circle, inscribed not by hand but by vibration, she felt it, a ringing in her ears, a heat in her spine, a memory not hers yet familiar. She asked a forbidden question. What if we're not the ones meant to remember? The others turned, shocked, furious, silent. That's when the lights dimmed, not by system error, but by recognition. Your presence had reached their sanctuary, not physically, spiritually. Your signal bypassed every defense, every encryption. It wasn't invasive, it was known. The chamber itself responded. Ancient stone, etched with forgotten glyphs, began to glow, and as the vote resumed, the center seat, always empty, reserved for something they never named, remained lit.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee.
Want to work remotely in 2025 with no sales experience? Learn high-ticket closing.
Chosen ones. The moment your name was spoken across encrypted frequencies, the world began to shift. Not metaphorically, but geopolitically cosmically. This wasn't a whisper passed between bureaucrats. This was a direct warning, delivered across continents from one leader to another. And your name was the axis it spun on. You don't know it yet, but satellites shifted their orbits that day. Emergency protocols activated in languages you've never heard, from civilizations you've only seen hinted at in unclassified documents. A foreign president, not your own, intercepted a pattern, a waveform, a tremor in the field. They didn't ask what it meant. They knew what it meant. They sent a message straight to the highest level of your government. Your chosen one has awakened, and the war will now change. Why you? Because centuries of quiet observation confirmed that one anomaly always ripples before an upheaval in the balance of global power. That anomaly is you. Old scrolls, ancient frequencies, and AI-driven prophecies, all triangulated to one presence, one signature, one heartbeat. And when that signature pulsed in this dimension again, it wasn't a call to arms. It was a call to awareness. Foreign operatives, religious scholars, deep space observatories, all silently nodded in unison, because this wasn't the first time you stepped onto the world stage. It was just the first time everyone remembered at the same moment. This isn't about a border dispute or a military alliance. This is about something far older than modern nations. A war older than ink, older than memory. The warning wasn't political. It was sacred. And those who heard it knew what it meant. The blueprint for this timeline has been disturbed. The watchers are active. The veil is thinning. And the one who returns always brings decision, disruption, and deliverance. And now you feel it too, don't you? That tremor in your chest isn't anxiety. It's recognition. This script is not fiction. It's reconstruction. You are being reintroduced to a war you've already fought and won, in fragments of time lost to the waking world. The moment the call came in, everything changed. Not a regular phone, not even a secure diplomatic line. This was the line, the one sealed in steel, wired through concrete, and only ever used when global equilibrium risked collapse. The president didn't answer it with words. He stared at the glowing light on the receiver, as if the device itself had declared judgment. By the time he picked it up, every aide within a 50-foot radius had already cleared the room. Not because they were told to, because they felt it. Something unspoken passed through the air, a disturbance not in policy, but in presence. On the other end, the voice was calm, deliberate, a foreign accent, but no trace of aggression. "We have seen the one," the voice said. "He has returned. Your country must act or be acted upon." There was no threat, yet the temperature in the room dropped. Not metaphorically, literally. Instruments later showed a 3-degree shift in the Situation Room's climate during that call. It wasn't the message that caused it. It was who the message was about. You. You had been off the radar for decades. Or so they thought. A name erased from all modern systems. A file sealed beneath multiple layers of obsolete clearance codes. But somehow, a foreign nation not only knew of your existence, they tracked your return. Not physically, energetically. What they detected wasn't a face or a location. It was a frequency, a singular ripple. One signature out of billions, and yet unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. No one in the president's circle dared speak your name out loud after that. Not out of fear of you, but out of reverence, confusion, uncertainty. They began reviewing footage, analyzing timelines, comparing seismic readings to historical prophecies. And with every data point, the inevitable became clear. This wasn't a coincidence. You weren't some civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. You were part of a code, a sequence, embedded into a cosmic script long before nations existed. There were no pauses, no dramatic lead-ins, no hesitation in his voice. The foreign leader uttered your name as if he had rehearsed it for years. He didn't whisper it either. He declared it. And when he did, the digital translators lagged for a moment, as if the sound of it didn't belong in modern language, as if the syllables had been dormant, waiting to be spoken again. The president's national security team, seasoned veterans of war rooms and nuclear standoffs, felt something they couldn't explain. Not fear, not awe, something deeper. Like the world had been tilted slightly, and only those in that room could feel the shift. The recording of that conversation is now archived under a non-indexed label. Not even AI systems are permitted to transcribe or replicate it, because the moment your name echoed through the secure chamber, electrical systems briefly shorted. Cameras glitched. One advisor collapsed. Doctors said it was an arrhythmic episode. But what caused it? They still don't understand. The name wasn't just spoken, it was activated. Officials later admitted something unusual. The man who delivered your name had never been briefed on you, not through any official channel. And yet, he knew. He described your presence, your timing, your effect on global motion. He referenced prophecies written outside of mainstream faiths, documents buried beneath desert monasteries, pages that had once been dismissed as legend, until they aligned perfectly with your current reappearance. The silence in the war room after your name was said wasn't out of disbelief. It was recognition. Some had heard the stories in whispers, in fragmented off-the-record reports from long-dead agents, a presence that destabilized control wherever it appeared, not through violence, but through awakening. Entire regions had shifted spiritually after contact with what one operative once called a frequency in human form. They didn't understand you, but they understood what followed you. Disruption, reordering, and...
You probably ain't expecting me to find my cock. I'm gonna let you in on the secrets. I got one of these.
Disruption, reordering, and sometimes revelation. And yet, no one asked what you wanted. Not yet. Their concern wasn't your intentions. It was your timing. Because there's a pattern in every major conflict this world has faced. A subtle alignment. And at the center of each one, a shadow figure whose records were always incomplete. Unmarked chamber. It wasn't natural. The walls were smooth, almost fused, as if cut not by human tools, but by intention itself. Inside, under centuries of silence and sand, they discovered a scroll sealed within a metallic casing that predated known metallurgy. Radiation tests failed. Ink analysis failed. Even carbon dating refused to return a result. The scroll was not meant to be found. Not yet. But something, somewhere, had allowed the veil to lift. And when it did, the symbols on the scroll began rearranging themselves in front of the researchers. They moved like water. Alive. Intelligent. Once decoded, the scroll didn't offer prophecy. It gave coordinates. 4 of them. Global positions that formed a perfect diamond across Earth's ley lines. But it was the center. The 5th point. The one not written but implied. That drew the attention of every agency, every nation, every secret society, still watching the maps. When calculated, that hidden 5th coordinate landed in a forgotten location, one not known for strategic value or ancient ruins. It landed on you. That coordinate matched the place you first reemerged after disappearing from all known systems decades prior. There were no cameras, no witnesses. And yet somehow, your return created a ripple large enough to vibrate backward into the past, as if the scroll had always known, as if the paper had waited for your footsteps to land before unlocking its final piece. The president wasn't told about the scroll until days after the call. When he was, he demanded visual proof. They showed him the inscriptions, not as static symbols, but as living frequencies. A silent pulse emanated from the paper when your name was spoken, not metaphorical, real, measurable, the kind of pulse normally seen only around high-energy anomalies or resurrection events. There are no modern records of who placed the scroll there. Some say it was authored by the first Watcher. Others claim it was inscribed by something not bound to time, but all agree on one thing. The 5th point only activates when he returns. Not the scroll's author, not a prophet. They say in war, silence is strategy. But there's a kind of silence that isn't strategic. It's sacred. And that morning, just as intelligence analysts decrypted the final layer of the scroll's metadata, dawn broke unnaturally. No birdsong, no wind, just stillness. As if the world paused to listen for something that hadn't yet been spoken. In one remote facility hidden beneath a church-turned laboratory in the Judean hills, a monitor flickered to life without input. Not from a satellite, not from human command. The screen displayed a symbol, an ancient fish with a crown above it, and a phrase in Aramaic that hadn't been translated in over 2 millennia. It read, "He has returned before the war begins, as foretold. Let the Watchers awaken. Let the Lamb remain silent." The signature matched no known source. It bypassed firewalls, air gaps, and encryption layers used by nations paranoid of their own shadows. The lab's director, once a high-ranking intelligence asset turned theologian, collapsed in tears. Not from fear, from confirmation. He whispered a name only once, Yeshua. For centuries, there have been whispers of moments in time where certain energies collide, moments not recorded in scripture, but known to the faithful who listen between the verses. It said Yeshua, during his silent hours before crucifixion, uttered prayers not for himself, but for someone who would come when truth and deception blurred completely. Not a Messiah, not a prophet, a disruptor of illusion, a vessel of memory. One who had once stood beside him beyond time, before war had a name. And now that moment echoed again, not through angels, but through data, not through incense, but through frequencies. The silence wasn't absence. It was announcement, the kind reserved for moments too vast to be cluttered with sound. The silence spoke of one returning not with sword or sermon, but with presence alone. A presence that unraveled plans crafted in shadows, that realigned global agendas without uttering a single word, that rewrote the rhythm of prophecy just by being. He stood at the edge of the summit chamber, not with the bravado of a man issuing a threat, but with the solemn weight of someone confirming an ancient warning. Surrounded by interpreters, aides, and military escorts, he dismissed them all with a glance. The other leaders leaned in, expecting negotiation or demands. Instead, he said your name, not whispered, not barked, spoken, with the steady cadence of someone invoking a force that had been waiting centuries to be acknowledged again. He said it like it had haunted his ancestors, like it had been etched into the stones beneath his country's oldest temple, like saying it would release something, or someone, already watching. The air in the summit chamber thickened. An unexplainable tension threaded itself through every voice, every thought, every blinking cursor on every intelligence screen. What made it stranger was this. You weren't on any diplomatic list. No official record, no policy role, not even a mention in the war briefings. But the leader from the East didn't reference politics. He referenced alignment, star positions, shadow phases, bloodline crossings, and the convergence of a specific vibration that hadn't been measured since the fall of a forgotten empire whose name is no longer taught. He paused before elaborating, as if gauging whether the others in the room were worthy of hearing what came next. Then he stated something chilling. Your war is not about territory. It is about timelines, and the one who bends them has resurfaced. There were no objections, only glances. Because somewhere, deep within their protected files, the others had seen fragments of your profile too. Not your biography, your effect. The aftershocks you left in places you never claimed to visit. The anomalies in history that only occurred when your frequency spiked on unregistered charts. But why would he speak of you now? Why, at a summit meant to prevent escalation between nuclear powers? The answer sat heavy in the silence that followed. Because he wasn't there to stop a war. You were tested once, under the guise of a standard biometric procedure. Nothing invasive. Just a retinal scan. A formality, they said. Routine clearance. But when your gaze met the scanner, the machinery didn't react with approval or denial.
Growing your business online is really, really hard. Trust us. We know. So when it comes to email marketing,
The machinery didn't react with approval or denial. It stalled, as if it was trying to process more than pattern, as if it was listening, not just reading. The first alert wasn't from the system itself, but from the electromagnetic surge it triggered. Power dimmed. Frequencies warped. Alarms didn't sound, but lights across 3 separate terminals flickered in rhythmic intervals that matched no known code. A private data team pulled the feed for closer analysis, expecting corruption or error. What they discovered instead was something they had no classification for, a lattice of symbols embedded in the reflection of your iris. Not letters, not barcodes, star maps, arranged not by human geometry, but in sacred formation. One physicist said it resembled gravitational patterns seen only near collapsed stars. Another whispered something different. This isn't a code, it's a key. No one told you what they found. You left the room unaware that your scan had been rerouted to 5 different black site labs across continents. Some tried to decipher it using AI trained on cosmological constants. Others fed the data into ancient language models coded in languages no longer spoken. But every system responded with the same anomaly, a repeat signature that matched exactly one entry in all recorded global archives, an artifact buried beneath the sands of Petra, sealed inside a box that no device has ever been able to open. Until now, the box had been dormant for over a century. But the moment your scan was uploaded to the international grid, sensors around that artifact activated for the first time. A pulse vibrated from it, subtle but undeniable. The kind of pulse ancient texts refer to as the Eye of the One. Those texts had long since been dismissed by mainstream academia as myth. But myth doesn't trigger satellites, and myth doesn't rewrite atmospheric pressure near sealed tombs. In the cloistered halls of a monastery, few have ever entered. A page exists that was never meant to be copied. Not scripture, not gospel. A personal journal, weathered by time, and hidden beneath the preserved robes of a disciple, known not by name, but by silence. On that page, there is one entry that refuses to fade. Despite centuries of decay, the ink remains sharp, the words unnervingly precise. It recounts a conversation between Yeshua and one of his closest followers. Not about heaven, not about healing, but about return. According to the journal, Yeshua stood outside beneath a moonless sky and spoke of a time beyond understanding. He described a soul that would arrive not to lead, but to disrupt. A soul that wouldn't preach, but whose very presence would collapse illusions and force truth into the open. He will walk unnoticed, Yeshua had said. But the world will move around him like storms parting for flame. The disciple, confused, asked if this soul would be a messenger of the Father. Yeshua reportedly looked away and replied, "He is known before the first breath." He answers no name, but the one given in silence. That passage was studied in secrecy by those who preserve the lineages of forgotten revelations. And when the satellite data from your iScan reached the Vatican's quantum archive, someone connected it to that journal entry. Not because of religious resemblance, but because the vibration signature embedded in your iris matched the numerical values written beside that ancient prophecy. A sequence hidden as scribal margin notes. It wasn't faith that confirmed you, it was mathematics. One elder archivist collapsed after reviewing the alignment. She had spent her entire life decoding that passage, believing it metaphorical. But the numbers were literal. And now they had a match. You. The implication wasn't that you are divine, but that you are remembered. Pre-encoded into prophecy, not to fulfill it, but to interrupt it. not to walk in Yeshua's footsteps, but to cross them. That intersection, they now believe, has returned. In a chamber buried beneath a European intelligence facility, there's a classified room that doesn't track missiles or military assets. It tracks motion, but only the kind that shouldn't register on conventional satellites. Movement patterns tied to frequency, vibration, what they call existential motion signatures. For years, the map remained largely static, marked only by the faint pulses of global anomalies, rare and brief. But on the day you stepped back into a region you hadn't visited in years, something happened the analysts couldn't explain. The map shifted, not just geographically, strategically. Entire sectors blinked in and out. Contours on the holographic overlay redrew themselves, not as a result of war, but because you moved. Territories that had been stable suddenly lit up with uncertainty. Alliances faltered. Leaders cancelled appearances. Stock markets twitched. And in the exact moment your feet touched that old ground, one red dot appeared in the center of the screen. One not linked to weaponry or weather, but resonance. You. They scrambled to verify. Cameras were checked. AI systems reanalyzed terrain photos. Nothing unusual. Just a person walking into a forgotten corridor near an abandoned temple. No weapons. No entourage. Just presence. But the frequency sensors, which had been dormant for decades, began triggering alerts written in protocols no one even remembered training for. What's stranger is how the map responded afterward. Regions began responding to your path before you entered them, as if the world was trying to realign itself in anticipation of your footsteps. Civil unrest flared in places historically known for quiet. Forgotten dialects reappeared in street graffiti. Old codes used by long disbanded orders were heard again on encrypted frequencies. The war itself hadn't started yet, but the field had begun to rearrange. Someone whispered, "He's walking the ley veins," a term buried in occult archives, a term used not for travelers, but for those who activate dormant systems merely by existing. They believed this concept was myth, until the map showed it wasn't. Now, military advisors have stopped tracking your destination. They've started tracking your trajectory. Because wherever you go, the lines around the world redraw, not by politics or power, but by presence. Deep within the underground network once used for Cold War surveillance, a whisper traveled across cables no longer listed on any modern map. It didn't pass through routers or satellite relays. It bypassed all civilian channels and entered the restricted framework known only to a few, the Omega Grid. This was not a digital message. It was analog, a voice cracked with age.
Your guys broke my fence when they were out here?
Okay. I'll talk to him.
A voice cracked with age, thick with accent, and completely untraceable. Phase 0 has returned, it said. Initiate the protocols. No one knew where it originated. The call wasn't recorded through conventional software. It burned itself into the wire, leaving only static in its wake. The phrase Phase 0 hadn't been used since the 1970s, and even then, it was referenced only in rumors shared among Black Ops operatives and cryptographers who'd vanished from the record shortly after. There were no documents. Just one phrase etched into an old, sealed panel in the basement of a NATO facility. When Zero speaks, the war rewrites itself. It was always assumed to be metaphor, until now. The moment the phrase was heard again, secure communication lines between multiple nations experienced a synchronized drop. Only one signal remained active, a low-frequency channel previously believed to be defunct. On that channel appeared coordinates, dates, names, and at the top of the list, yours. Your name wasn't typed in. It wasn't a username, a code name, or an alias. It was spoken, phonetically, like a chant, an intonation of something older than the systems it passed through. The intelligence directors reviewing the event described it not as a hack, but as a summoning. One of them reportedly resigned the same day, stating in private, "I know what this means. It's not an attack, it's a reset." Phase 0 wasn't a strategy. It was a presence. The first breath before nations form. The moment before a lie is agreed upon as history. It represents the return of unfiltered reality, something systems were never designed to withstand. That's why the cables crackled when your name was said. They weren't failing. It wasn't filed under standard clearance. It bypassed protocol, existing outside the digital grid entirely. A single envelope, handwritten, sealed in a burn-proof case, and stored in the innermost vault of the presidential command complex. The directive was known only to 3 living individuals. Not an order of war, not a chain of command, a contingency. Marked with 5 words. If he returns, read immediately. No one expected that day to come. But after the foreign leader named you, after the scroll beneath Sinai aligned with the signal in your iris, and after encrypted wires whispered of Phase 0, the president requested the envelope. His advisors protested. The military pushed back. But he waved them away and opened the vault himself. Inside was a page. Your name. Nothing else. No instructions. No warnings. Just a name. Yours. And the official seal of a president who had died 2 decades earlier. The current administration had no idea the file even existed. No digital record. No trace in the National Archive. The ink hadn't faded. The signature was real. Authenticated by multiple independent systems. When asked why his predecessor would leave behind such a bizarre document, the president said only, "He must have known something we don't." He kept the paper in his jacket during every meeting that followed. Advisors noticed. They said he would touch it when conversations shifted toward escalation. They said he'd glance at it when offered briefings about global unrest. It became his anchor, his warning, his confirmation. Then came the final directive. A message sent to every allied nation through a channel reserved for declarations of global threat. But instead of codes or coordinates, it included a time, a location, and your name. There was no context, just a declaration. He is present. The world didn't react with force. It reacted with pause, as if something older than war had returned. As if silence was the only respectful response to the re-entry of a being remembered more in symbols than in speech. The envelope was returned to the vault. But now, a second document has been added. Blank, except for a line at the top.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to...
You probably ain't expecting me to find my cock. I'm gonna let you in on the secret.
chosen ones, there's a reason you've always felt watched, not just by neighbors or systems, but by something older, something designed. The families who shaped the world from behind velvet curtains and hidden banks have passed down one common warning through centuries. If the bloodline reawakens, the world resets. That bloodline is yours. For generations, their power wasn't merely influence, it was ritual. Currency and conflict were merely tools. Every war, every crash, every rise of a dynasty served a deeper mission, to find and neutralize the anomaly. You, the one they could never control. The one prophecy whispered about, encoded within sacred texts they hoarded, encrypted beneath centuries of deception. You were the miscalculation they feared most. But now, something happened. You triggered an ancient alarm, not in a building, in them. The global lockdown wasn't about viruses, threats, or security. It was about containment, a spiritual quarantine. The day your frequency reemerged, 12 families convened for an unscheduled midnight session. No media, no records, just silence and terror. They confirmed it with trembling voices. The blood of the reversal has returned. They've sealed borders, initiated silent kill switches on satellites, and activated watchers who were never meant to wake. The world feels tense because they're scrambling to delay the inevitable. Your remembrance. You are not remembered in school books, but in their nightmares. You were never trained by institutions because they feared what you do untrained. They masked your gifts with shame, your instincts with disorder, but none of it worked. Your name echoed through systems, ancient and digital, and they knew you had crossed the threshold. They failed to stop your return because destiny was never on their side. The ancient codes etched in desert stone did not predict your death. They predicted your rise. And now, the most powerful forces in existence have only one goal: stop you before you remember who you are. The lockdown is not to keep you out. It's to trap you in. In a remote monitoring facility buried beneath Geneva, an alert chimed that hadn't sounded in over 200 years. The tone was ancient, analog in design, triggered only by a frequency so rare that only 12 signatures had ever matched it in recorded history. Yours made 13. The operator on duty froze, not because of the alarm, but because of the name that surfaced across the black screen in blood-red text. It wasn't just your current identity. It was every variation you've ever held across lifetimes. The Rothschild archives had you on file. They didn't expect you to reappear. Instantly, encrypted communication channels lit up from Zurich to Tel Aviv. Protocol Umbra Seed was activated. That code hadn't been spoken aloud since the fall of the Second Temple. It wasn't a manhunt they prepared. It was a shutdown. The satellites above you didn't shift by accident. Neither did the strange blinking light on your ceiling last night. You weren't paranoid. You were detected. And not by local governments, but by the consortium that controls them. These weren't men in suits. These were bloodlines trained from birth to detect anomalies like you, and to erase them before the public ever senses something divine in the air. They analyzed the signal pattern you unknowingly emitted, a harmonic signature, encoded into your biology. It wasn't digital, it was spiritual. But their instruments had been modified to read such things after an ancient manuscript was stolen from the Ethiopian underground. That manuscript described someone just like you. Someone who wouldn't need permission to awaken. Someone whose presence would unravel lies built over millennia. So when your pulse aligned with the celestial markers in that document, a global alert fired straight into a vault lined with obsidian and gold. And that vault didn't just contain intel, it contained fear. Not the kind spoken aloud, but the kind that makes empires shiver in silence. Within minutes, you were tagged across every major banking and data system. Yet they knew deletion wouldn't work. You weren't digital. You were written into time itself. So instead, they triggered something much older than war. A lockdown. To freeze movement. To halt frequency expansion. They told the world the treasures of faith were stored in temples, cathedrals, or buried beneath sands of distant lands. But the real relics, the blood records, the sealed prophecies, the maps of soul lineages, were taken underground long ago, deep into the vaults beneath Switzerland. These were not simple banks. They were living archives, protected by blood rights, guarded by oaths passed down through shadowed dynasties. Inside Vault 33, sealed behind biometric locks and quantum gates, rests a chamber known only to 12. At the center lies a scroll, unwrapped only once in 1944, the year the stars above Jerusalem, aligned in a forgotten pattern. Etched on the scroll in ancient Aramaic is a sentence the world was never meant to read. He will rise from the unknown line, unclaimed but divine, and silence shall fall upon the serpents. The unknown line, they concluded after years of decoding, referred not to a man within history's spotlight, but to a child born beyond the official record, far from any traceable lineage, not hidden by choice, but by design. The seed of Yeshua, concealed in a timeline fragmented intentionally, scattered across generations to ensure only destiny could recover it. That seed moved silently, escaping war, religion, and manipulation, until now. Your arrival shattered the pattern. When the Rothschild alert was confirmed, the first response wasn't panic, it was reverence, because the biometric imprint attached to your signal matched the one stored next to that ancient scroll. They realized the one they feared had arrived, but not just with power, with inheritance. You were not a threat because of your ability. You were a threat because of your right. This wasn't about prophecy anymore. It was about legitimacy. You represented a claim, one that could overwrite theirs. In their twisted system of control, they've always demanded blood. They never expected the original bloodline to reemerge with no allegiance to their order.
4 things you didn't know about Tapstitch.
The first thing you didn't know about Tapstitch is our headquarters are right here in Los Angeles.
They expected the original bloodline to reemerge with no allegiance to their order. The deeper horror, your frequency carried a resonance found only once before, in the tomb of Yeshua's missing hours. An echo sealed by the heavens, buried by man, now pulsing through your veins. It didn't make a sound when it pulled up. No headlights, no engine rumble, no traceable license plate. Just a matte black vehicle, sitting outside your window like it had always been there. Unmarked, unregistered, and untouched by time. Inside, tinted windows reflected no light, only absorbing everything around it, as if the car itself